I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The Kris Anne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match.
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the Kris Anne Hall Show. I am obviously Kris Anne Hall. Do I have to introduce myself every day? I don't know, that's just the thing they do, isn't it? So many things we do because that's the thing they do. You can find me at KrisAnneHall.com, KrisAnnehall.com. So excited to be here today. But there is something that is heavy on my heart that I want to discuss with you today. Something that I have been contemplating discussing for quite some time, just not quite sure how to do it. And it's time. It is time to discuss this. It is not going to be received well by some, but you know, it's time that we do this. And in this, we're going to break the silence on the Ferguson issue. You know, I haven't really been discussing Ferguson. I haven't wanted to be pulled into that distractive narrative. But this is a valuable teaching moment that I cannot let pass by. And I've been praying and contemplating on this issue, I have wanted to make sure that I was able to address it properly because some people will not take this well. And it's important truth. And I always endeavor to bring important truth in such a way that it is palatable to all. Because you see, it's truth is hard to take when you've been taught the wrong things for a very long time. Especially when that truth challenges what you've thought to be true your whole life. And that is part of what I do when I teach. I wish that I had a body camera on me sometimes so that I could show people their faces while I'm teaching. Because the physical manifestations of being exposed to truth they did not know is priceless. It really is. And I think we are not aware of just how brainwashed we have become. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about property rights. We're going to talk about the right to keep and bear arms. We're going to talk about, as the Supreme Court would put it, the natural right of resistance and self-preservation. We are going to talk about that all in context of the Ferguson fiasco. I would just call it that, the Ferguson fiasco. And here's what is happening. There are groups of Oathkeepers. Oathkeepers who are now guarding the businesses that are being destroyed in Ferguson. They are coming out and volunteers from first responder backgrounds. They're police officers, other sort of civic trained protection people. They are former military people who are taking it upon themselves to protect the property of these people who are literally unable to protect themselves. And this is causing some strife, let's just put it that way, This is causing some discontent. Fox News says the police are not happy, and they're threatening to arrest these oath keepers. And they're threatening them, you must stop this protection of this property. You must stop what you're doing, or we will arrest you. Now, the business owners are grateful for the protection. They're military, police, public safety officials, is what Fox says. But the police department has said, the St. Louis County Police Department says, stop, or you will be arrested. Now, please tell me, why is it that it's any of the police's business who the businesses have for their private protection? Is it not the purview of these businesses to hire security? And so what is the difference of hiring security and allowing someone to volunteer to do security? Now, look, I have seen security guards in, maybe that's the kind of security that the police want them to have, the hired security. Now, this is not a statement or a reflection on all hired security, but I think a lot of times when we think of that, we think of mall cop, right? How is mall cop going to help these people in Ferguson? These... that just to create a stereotype and make somebody mad, okay? The guy who's 70 years old, weighs 350 pounds, and has a badge sewn to his shirt. How is that guy going to protect these businesses from that type of violence? It's not going to work. But these people are willing to come forward and do what they're doing, put themselves in harm's way to keep other people safe. Why is it that we're not getting this kind of response from the St. Louis Police Department? Why is it that we're not getting this kind of response from the Missouri National Guard? Where in the world has the money gone that all these people needed to keep us safe if this is what keeping us safe means in their definition? That we have to do it ourselves. But the interesting thing is that's the way it's supposed to be. To be honest with you. That is the way it's supposed to be. We are not supposed to rely on government to keep us safe. And the fact that we are relying on government to keep us safe puts us in the very situation that these business owners are in Ferguson, Missouri. They told these people to stop. They said no. The business owners are grateful. They give them hugs and tears of appreciation. They say they can't believe that perfect strangers would come and do that for them. And they said, we won't stop. Because no one else is there to stand in the gap. No one else is there to do the job. Why not? Where have all our tax dollars gone to keep us safe? Do you know what should be coming out of the government, out of the media narrative now? You see, this is how inept, how incapable the government is of keeping you safe. No matter how many tax dollars you throw at the government, no matter how many liberties you allow them to circumvent in the war for drugs, when it comes right down to it, they will not keep you safe. And that's why you have an inalienable right to keep and bear arms for self-preservation, as the Supreme Court said in 2008 in Columbia v. Heller. The natural right of resistance and self-preservation. Believe it or not, Samuel Adams said that in 1772 when he said, he wrote a dissertation on the rights of men. He said, it is among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; secondly, liberty; third, property. together, number 4, with the right to protect and defend them with the best means possible. And this, unfortunately, at times throughout history, the right to keep and bear arms is the best means possible. When someone is approaching you with an insurpassable violence, then the right to keep and bear arms is essential to the preservation of your life, your liberty, and your property. If we had not been brainwashed over the last 100 years about what our right to keep and bear arms actually means, these business owners would not be disarmed. They would not be afraid to defend their own property, and this would not be happening. I'm going to tell you something that is also going to sound very controversial, because this Ferguson fiasco would not happen in certain parts of the South. It would not happen. Not because the South is racist, but because the South understands certain aspects of the right to keep and bear arms. It would not happen in certain areas of this country where open carry laws exist, like places in Washington and California and I think Michigan, Minnesota. Are there places like that in Minnesota, open carry? I mean, I'm serious. Where the people are familiar with their right to keep and bear arms, the Ferguson thing would not happen. Because I'm going to tell you what. All you have to do to stop a bully is punch him in the face. Or a good kick in the well, my son calls them their tenders. A good kick in the tenders will stop a bully. And when someone is coming to loot your business with an unsurpassable force, if you just go ahead and meet that with a blunt force, that will stop that bully and all bullies that will come after him. You know, there's something to be said for the right to keep and bear arms, not just for hunting and skeet shooting, but as the Supreme Court said, for your natural right of resistance and self-preservation. It's time that we wake up, shake off the chains, and start defending ourselves.
Kris Anne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
I've also asked the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And that's why we are where we are. Eric Holder is telling us many, many moons ago that the government is on a mission to brainwash us about guns. That's why these business owners do not know how to defend themselves and are incapable of defending themselves. This is why. Because we have been brainwashed to think differently about guns. We have been brainwashed to fear guns. We have been brainwashed into thinking that guns are not necessary. We have been brainwashed into thinking that only the government needs to have guns because it's the government's job to keep us safe. And that's precisely where they want to be. They want us to be in a situation where we are helpless and hopeless, and they are our only hope. Our only hope for survival rests within the government so that we are at their whim and fancy. Your rights are not granted by the government. Your rights are supposed to be protected by them. Among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, a right to life; secondly, liberty; thirdly, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. You see, I need you to know that the only reason this is happening in Ferguson is because we have become so fundamentally ignorant of what we are based upon. The fundamental foundations of this country: life, liberty, property, and the right to self-preservation and resistance. And I hope that those Oathkeepers will resist the government's demands that they stop. We should not be dependent upon the government for our self-preservation. That's not self-preservation. That's government preservation. We can't rely on the government. Let me tell you what, if we are to rely on the government for our protection, let's just take the robbers and the looters out of the equation. Let's just, think about foreign invasion. I live in Florida. If someone wanted to invade Florida through the Florida Peninsula, if all we had were just the government to protect us, we would be invaded and we would be overtaken. But you see, foreign countries know that they don't have to deal with just the government, that the people in this country, no matter how diminishing that number might be becoming, do own arms and are armed and know how to use them. And they realize that they don't have to simply deal with the military or the law enforcement. They have to deal with potentially every single citizen. Don't you know that's why the UN wants us to be involved with the Small Arms Treaty? So that we are easily conquerable? So that we can become just as dependent upon the United Nations for our survival as every other pathetic country in this world who cannot defend themselves? Because when was the last time the United Nations actually defended someone? I mean, with any semblance of success? Never. And that's the position that they want us to be in, completely dependent upon government. Noah Webster said an amazing thing. He said, before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe. The standing army. How does the standing army rule? There are several ways that a standing army rules. Obviously, the standing army rules by ruling over you. But the standing army also rules when you have no other option to defend yourself. Now, Noah Webster's indication that we keep the standing army from ruling over us by being armed brings up a picture of us standing on our porch, with a shotgun. Get off my porch, standing army. But there's so much more to that. So much that we miss. Let's talk about why we need to be armed to keep the standing army from ruling over us when we come back from the break.
Said I was born for this, and some people wouldn't like that I was different. It never really mattered how hard it would be, cause she filled me with love and the strength to lead. She said, if you were gonna be a flame, then we're gonna light a bonfire. Let it burn, gonna burn something down if you get in our way.
The Kris Anne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe. Europe has been disarmed for quite some time now, and it's a lesson that our framers hope to learn from. And Noah Webster was just simply telling us, if you don't want to be ruled by a standing army, then you must keep and bear arms at all times. Well, what does it mean to be ruled by a standing army? It means that you must do what they say you do by gunpoint. It also means you must do what they say you must do because you have no other way to protect yourself. Fear. Fear is the driving force here. And let's talk about a couple situations. Let's sort of escape from the Ferguson issue. We'll go back a little bit. Talk about the Boston bombing because that was just very scary too. I'm not talking about the bombing situation being scary. I'm talking about what happened 3 days later. When our local law enforcement paired up with the federal government, marching down our streets like they were marching down the streets of Baghdad, all in the ruse to keep us safe, pointing military-style weapons in the faces of homeowners, innocent homeowners, dragging them out of their homes without warrants in an effort to keep us safe. That was scary, but you know what was even scarier than that? The people who were cheering them on. The people who were grateful that no warrant was served, but they were safe. Grateful that that they were now being protected. That's very sad. Very, very sad. Because now the standing army rules over you. Because you were incapable of protecting yourself. Let me tell you what. This would be a completely different situation in my neighborhood. I live in a very rural area. Bunch of rednecks, okay? Where redneck is a proud label that they wear, not a racist label. And I'm going to tell you what. If anybody comes up to my house like that, get out on the floor, get on the floor. You got to get out. We're here to keep you safe. There's somebody here in your house that you don't need, that doesn't need to be here. We need to keep you safe. My response is going to be to them, I'm sorry, where is your warrant? Where is your warrant? Because you are not coming in my house without a warrant. I don't recognize exigent circumstances. You are not in hot pursuit because no one has just ran through my house. I would know if someone ran through my house. I don't recognize those exceptions. They are not written into the Fourth Amendment. Those exceptions were created by the government to expand their power, and I do not recognize government-created expansions of their own power. So no, you cannot come in without a warrant. And by the way, let me remind you, our family is fully aware of the Second Amendment, and we are armed and able to protect ourselves. If there is someone, let me just let you know right off the bat, if there is someone in my house that does not belong, I don't need the government to protect me because everyone in my house is armed, and we will shoot them ourselves. I don't need the government to protect me. I can protect myself in my own home. I know my home better than they do. If someone is there, I will take care of it. And by the way, I know what Richard Henry Lee knew to be an essential aspect of liberty. Richard Henry Lee wrote in the letter from the Federal Farmer, January 25, 1788, whereas to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. If you are not training your children on how to keep and bear arms, you are not preserving liberty. And do not get all hyped up at me about me wanting to arm our children, okay? I am wanting you to preserve liberty. And if you don't train your children to keep and bear arms now, that's how gun accidents happen. That's how the schools are able to brainwash them to fear guns. That's how the government is able to control the minds of our adults because our parents didn't contradict the brainwashing when they were young. Gun accidents will not rise if we teach our children how to use guns. They will go down. You cannot hide anything from a child in your house. You know that. I know that. And if you have guns in your house and you're trying to hide them from your child, they will find them. And if their only experience with guns is video games and movies, that's how accidents happen. My son has been shooting since he was 3 years old. He is 8 now, and he knows how to operate every firearm in my house. I don't have to hide them from him, because he knows how to respect them. He does not fear them, he respects them. He knows the power that he wields, and he knows that it's not a toy. It's not something in a video game that we use where we just hit the reset button. No, sir. It is not. And my child, as he grows, will know how to preserve liberty. He will know, as the Supreme Court says, how to resist, and he will know self-preservation. If we had this truth in Boston, we wouldn't have seen that. If we had this truth in Ferguson, we would not be watching what we're watching right now. Because, you know, the crazy thing is, the only people who are brainwashed against using guns are law-abiding citizens. That's the only people who are brainwashed against using guns. The thugs in Ferguson are not afraid to use violence. They're not afraid to bring out their guns. Brainwash people, Eric Holder, against looting buildings and burning down people's businesses. Why don't we have an active effort to brainwash people against doing something like that? Oh my goodness, then that would be morality, wouldn't it? We can't brainwash our citizens into morality, because then they might realize that their rights are God-given and not government-given. If we brainwash our people into morality, they will understand that they have a moral obligation to protect their life, their liberty, and their property. They have a moral obligation to limit the government. They have a moral obligation. Oh my goodness, no, we can't have that, because then they would understand that they have a moral obligation to elect moral people instead of accepting the two-party lesser of two evils brainwashing. Are you seeing where I'm going here? You have to keep us immoral. You have to keep us brainwashed, to keep us enslaved. And that's where we are today, America. No longer understanding. You see, we have so much to overcome, even in our conservative circles. We love little bumper stickers, don't we, with quippy, clever boy sayings. You can have my guns when you pry them from my cold, dead hand. Let me tell you something, patriot. That's exactly what will happen. History proves that if the Second Amendment is the only thing that you're hyped up about defending, then that's exactly what will happen. They will come and get your guns, and they will pry them from your cold, dead hand. You know why? Because everything else is gone. Do you know the difference between Bundy Ranch and Ruby Ridge? Yeah, I know you remember Ruby Ridge. The Weaver family violently attacked by an armed government, shooting a teenage boy. Like a sniper range, shooting a teenage boy who was running after his dog. That's what our government does when it bears arms. Shoots teenagers who are running after their dogs. Do you know what they had at Ruby Ridge? They had guns. But Ruby Ridge ended very, very differently than Bundy Ranch, didn't they? Bundy Ranch had guns too. But it wasn't just the Bundy family. Because see, in Ruby Ridge, it was just the Weaver family. Why? Not because of the Second Amendment, but because of the First Amendment. We didn't have the means to communicate with one another. We didn't have the means to broadcast from the Weaver Ranch what was going on. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet to communicate with each other. Bundy Ranch ended differently because as soon as it happened, as soon as the government arrived, people were there with cell phones broadcasting what was happening. That's why they want net neutrality, by the way, because they want kill switches on your cell phones, so that they can't have you broadcasting these things. See, Bundy Ranch ended differently because of the First Amendment, not the Second Amendment. It ended differently because there was a way to gather the people together. There was a way to show the population that it was not Bundy who was being violent and oppressive. It was the government. It was the government agents who were throwing 57-year-old cancer patients to the ground, tasing people who are not armed, attacking them with dogs who are not armed. And guess what? If Weaver, Mr. and Mr. Weaver, had had that type of First Amendment option, they would be alive. But now we're brainwashed about Ruby Ridge and the Weaver family because the only people that walked away from that was the government, and we're left with the government brainwashing. If Eric Holder is telling you that the government is willing to brainwash you about guns, how do you not believe that they're willing to brainwash you about everything else? Make you think differently about the Weaver family. Make you feel differently about what happens when the government shows up with force. Because the government is always right, right? That's why we have to give them exceptions to the Fourth Amendment that aren't simply there. But if we understood liberty, if we understood that it was essential that everyone always possess arms. Richard Henry Lee was telling us that if you are not possessing arms, you're not preserving liberty. If you're not packing, you're not preserving. And if you're not teaching your children how to do it either, then you are woefully negligent to the liberty that has been bought and paid for by those who came before us. No, I will not distinguish myself from the Oathkeepers who are defending those buildings. I will stand with them, and I will say, thank you for preserving my liberty and the liberty of those who own those businesses.
The Kris Anne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist. Kris Anne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
You know, I think that we have to understand the difference between a vigilante and what these Oathkeepers are doing. These Oathkeepers are not running through the street shooting people that are throwing cocktails, or shooting people who are fighting in the street. They are simply being a presence of protection who are willing to preserve the property of these people. That is not vigilantism. So maybe the police chief needs to understand that. That is not vigilantism. As a matter of fact, if, you know what, I think Missouri, did Missouri take, no, that was just St. Charles County. St. Charles County stripping the sheriff of his authority. Let me tell you what. Why are we hearing from the St. Louis police chief? Why are we not hearing of the sheriff from St. Louis County? If the sheriff of St. Louis County had any cojones and had any knowledge of his responsibility as a constitutional officer to preserve liberty, he would stand on those rooftops and deputize those Oathkeepers. That's what they would be doing. The sheriff would be going around deputizing people whom he trusts and he knows are trained with the right sense of mind to preserve the liberty and the property of these people. That's what a constitutional sheriff would be doing. He would be deputizing people to help him protect and serve. He would not be standing and calling them vigilantes, condemning them what they were doing, and threatening them with arrest. Do you know why the St. Louis police chief has not arrested any of these people? Because he's not going to. All right? It's not going to happen. So, Oathkeepers, keep your oath. Because apparently the police chief in St. Louis is incapable. He is a coward. He is uneducated on the principles of liberty and his duty to preserve them. The oath that he took. And the sheriff, who is conspicuously absent here, should be marked as much of a coward as well. And if I am wrong and St. Louis County has also stripped the sheriff of his duties, then that even makes the sheriff even more so a coward. Because the sheriff, having taken an oath that he cannot keep, and is unwilling to keep even though he has taken it, makes him unqualified for the office that he holds. These are very strong words. I have told you that I contemplated this for quite some time. It's hard to take. But the problem that we have in this country is that our law enforcement officers are now law enforcement and not peacekeepers. They are engaged in crime prevention instead of liberty protection. When did that happen? When did that brainwashing come about? When did we start calling our peace officers law enforcement? When did we start creating agencies that were engaged in crime prevention instead of liberty preservation? Crime prevention is a lie. You cannot prevent crime. It is physically impossible, emotionally impossible, spiritually impossible to prevent crime. That is just a mechanism to increase power for government. Crime cannot be prevented. There are only two ways that will prevent crime. Number one, morality. Having a moral people who realizes that doing bad things is wrong. And the other thing is force. Showing immoral people that they cannot do crimes because they will be met with the right to preserve their life, their liberty, and their property. We are being brainwashed in the wrong direction, people. And it's time that we wake up and stand up and start teaching our children to preserve their liberty themselves. I don't quote the Supreme Court, but even in 2008, the Supreme Court said in Columbia v. Heller that we have a natural right of resistance and self-preservation. Combine that with the Supreme Court in 1939 that says we have the right to own any armament that the military owns. If the military owns it, the people have a right to own it as well. Time to stand up and step up and stop being slaves. Don't be oppressed and brainwashed. God have mercy on us.